Today is the yahrzeit of Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, probably the greatest Torah commentator in the history of the Jewish people. There's a saying that from Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our teacher, to Moshe, meaning Rambam, there is none like Moshe. And so today is the day in which they seem to be both combined, because we recognize the yahrzeit, the passing of Rambam, at the same moment that we recognize the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu in Moshe our teacher, the baby, in Parsha Shemot. And it's an interesting story, because the story of Parsha Shemot, among other things, is about the creation of the anti-hero. You know, Shane, Gary Cooper, Bogey, but maybe the icon of all of these is in fact Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was born to a family of privilege. He was born to a Levite family, but we don't know to whom. They're not mentioned by name at the time of his birth. He's abandoned as a baby into the Nile River to save his life. And indeed, his life is saved by who? By the princess, the daughter of Pharaoh herself, who, in spite of advice from her own handmaids and the laws of Egypt, decides to take this little circumcised child, Hebrew, into her own family. And he's raised in the palace. He's a favorite of Pharaoh. He moves up. Despite the suspicions that must have existed about this circumcised Semite who was so close to the throne of Pharaoh, until one day he goes out to his brothers, and what does he see? He sees a taskmaster of Pharaoh beating a Jew. And at that moment, he reacts, and he murders the taskmaster of Pharaoh. Fearing for his own life, he leaves Egypt. Shabbat Shalom. Fearing for his life, he leaves Egypt and runs off to Midian, distant miles, hundreds of miles away. He escapes the wrath of Pharaoh's executioners. And there he grows old, he marries, he grows old, he has children, and he virtually retires, living the idyllic life of a shepherd for his father-in-law's flock. And this is really what his life seemed like it was going to be forever, until while he's shepherding the flock, he sees a bush that burns and is not consumed. His life is interrupted. What to do? He turns and he looks at it, and from that bush comes a voice. It says, Moshe, Moshe. And it is the voice of an angel, the voice of God. And he's saying to Moshe, take off your shoes, you're on holy ground. It is I, the God of your fathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, who speaks to you. And he tells Moshe, I have heard the suffering of my children in Egypt, and I'm going down there to free them. And you, Moshe, you're a retired shepherd yourself. I've chosen you. You will be the ones who will go and free them and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. So you think Moshe jumps at the chance? No, not at all. Moshe makes a series of excuses why he shouldn't be him. I don't have the skills. I'm not a good orator. Something with my tongue. The Jews won't believe me. You know how the Jews are. They're not going to accept me, right? After all, who am I? I'm kind of like the Hollywood Jew. They're working slaves in the mud pits, being beaten. And who is I? I grew up in the palace of Pharaoh. Why would they trust me? And even if I could speak well, and even if the Jews would trust me, there's always Pharaoh. Remember my father-in-law. That's not a good scene. He is not going to agree. I can tell you in advance, he will not let the Jews go. God has none of it. He makes clear, I made a decision. You're it. You're going. He gives him some signs and wonders, staff into a snake. He picks it up, puts his hand in his vest, and comes out. He has leprosy, or not leprosy, but tsaras. Puts it back in. It's healed. He says, you'll do these things, and it will all work out. But you should know, it won't be easy. I'm hardening Pharaoh's heart. And more than that, you have one ace in the hole, and that is, well, two aces in the hole. Ace number one is your brother, Aaron, is going to come and join you. And he's going to be with you through this period. And two, I am with you. And in the end, it will work out. Believe me. So Moshe goes, he meets his brother. Zipporah circumcises their son to save Moshe's life, another story for another time. And they approach Pharaoh. And they say to Pharaoh, the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, the God of Israel, has sent me to you to tell you that he wants his children to go, to leave Egypt and return in freedom. Let my people go. Well, just as Moshe predicted, not only does Pharaoh not agree to it, even with all the tests and signs that they do, he says, you know the problem with you Jews? You have too much time on your hands. So from now on, you will make the same number of bricks you always make, but with no straw. You have to gather your own straw. This makes life virtually impossible for the Jews. It's an unbearable thing. And the Jews are so angry, not with Pharaoh, but with Moshe and Aaron. They say, you put a sword in Pharaoh's hand to kill us. And they virtually chase Moshe and Aaron out of the land. It's not a good situation. And as the Parsha comes to a close, an extremely depressed Moshe asks God, what have you done to these people? Why have you sent me? Why is all this going on? It doesn't make any sense. It's a failure. It's finished. It's over. They'll never get out. Moshe's given up. And it is only at that moment that God says, now, we are ready. As if to say, now that even you who have seen me and heard me have given up, now is the time we will begin the process of redemption. Wow. And at that point, our Parsha closes. So what do we have? And I'm going to wrap up here because I've gone on for a long time. Maybe because I missed you so much over this period. We have the story of a child being born, being abandoned, being found, being raised in the palace, being chased out of the land and returned, being told, you are the Savior, you are the redemption, and him saying, no, I am not. And God saying, grow a spine, or I'll grow it for you, and sending him back. And he fails. Chased out of the land. Hated by his own people. End of Act 2. Act 3 is about to begin. There will be a turn. And we all know the end of the story. But what is the lesson? The lesson seems to be that the ups and downs of life and the hardships do build character. If instead of making excuses why others are making it hard for you, why you're unable to do something, you forge ahead, you will eventually have success. Persistence really is the key. Emunah, belief, faith, and persistence. We see that here in the land of Israel as well. The odds are so stacked against this little country the size of New Jersey, and have been from before the day it was born. And yet, like the baby Moshe, they rise to a point of tremendous success. And what we see in this parsha is everything hangs by a thread of decisions. Little baby is in the river. Could have floated away. Could have drowned. And yet, it's Pharaoh's daughter who makes a decision against the advice of her own people and the laws of her nation to save the child that will not only redeem the Jewish people, but bring them to Sinai and give them the laws, the Torah of God, which will change not the Jewish people only, but the entire world, as we see it has done. So, was it the decision of Pharaoh's daughter? Yes, it was. Was it the decision of Yocheved, his mother, to put him in the basket? Yes, it was. Was it the decision of Moshe to save the Jew who was being beaten by the Egyptian at great risk to himself? Yes, it was. So all of the little decisions add up to something that in the end changed the entire universe, the entire world, and gave us Moshe Rabbeinu at Sinai receiving the Torah, which would eventually change the entire world. So carefully make those decisions. Don't underrate your ability. You too can make life-changing decisions, world-changing decisions. When you throw a rock in the water, the ripples go very, very, very far. Shabbat Shalom from rainy Karmiel. Wishing you well. See you next week, God willing. Shabbat Shalom.